Hi, second graders. Today's story is from Knowledge 3, Lesson 7, called Athens, the Birthplace of Democracy. Before we begin our read aloud, we're going to go over our vocabulary words. Our first vocabulary word for today's story is the word assembly. Repeat after me. Assembly. Assembly is a group or meeting of many people. Our next vocabulary word is the word debated. Say debated. Debated means to discuss or argue different points of view. Our last vocabulary word is the word democracy. Say democracy. Democracy is a way of governing or ruling that gives the people the power to choose their leaders and help create their own laws. Hero and Dion were on their way to Dion's home, passing through the central marketplace of Athens, where people spent as much time conversing as they did shopping. The two young men stopped to buy some olives at a farmer's booth that stood beneath the branches of two old olive trees. As they stepped out into the sunlight again, Dion turned to look up at the top of the high hill. "Really, Hero," Dion asked, "is there more a beautiful spectacle anywhere than the Parthenon? My father and I have traveled to many wonderful places on our trading voyage around the Mediterranean, but I never saw anything equal to it." Hero agreed as he looked up at the magnificent temple. Just as the city-state of Sparta focused on self-discipline and training for battle, the Athenians focused on their love of art, beautiful architecture, and sculpture. The Athenians filled the remarkable city-state with graceful buildings that were pleasing to the eye. Inside these buildings and in the public spaces around them, famous artists created statues for all to enjoy. Statues that even today are considered some of the finest ever to be made. The Athenians were wealthy enough to cover a 40-foot high statue of Athena in gold before setting it in the Parthenon. The ancient Greeks showed their devotion to Athena by visiting her statue and offering her prayers and gifts. At the same time that the arts were the glory of Athens, Athenian scientists were making discoveries that would become the basis for modern science. For example, one scientist you will learn about was a great observer whose ideas and classifications are still used today. Other ancient Greeks contributed inventions that the next civilizations developed more fully, including the gear, screw, watermill and catapult, plumbing, using furnaces to melt and shape iron, and using air, water, or steam for central heating. Athenian merchants such as Dion and his father were trading as far west as present-day Britain and as far east as present-day India. These merchants brought back goods and even more knowledge from distant lands. This is another way that Athens differed from Sparta. As you heard earlier, Sparta was a closed society, meaning that most of the people were not allowed to travel outside the city for trade or exploration. At the heart of these remarkable achievements was the Athenian belief that human beings could achieve almost anything they set their mind to, and whatever they could not achieve, they could at least fail with great grace. In this belief, in this benefit or good of the independent thinking or thinking for oneself that led to the greatest of all Athenian gifts of the world, greater than the art, the architecture, or the Olympic Games, the gift of democracy. As Hero and Dion continued walking on that sunny afternoon so long ago, they glanced ahead and saw a face that they knew well. "It's Pericles," Hero exclaimed. All Athenians knew the man whom they have elected or chosen to run their government year after year. Pericles held great power both as an army general and as the leader of their government. However, like all Athenian leaders, he had to be re-elected or chosen again to his office every year. And if the Athenians did not like the job he was doing, they could vote him out of office or right out of Athens for up to 10 years. It had not always been this way. In the past, Athens was ruled by a king. Then several nobles started to rule in the place of the king. Finally, a new leader came along who thought every citizen should be able to take part and have a say in their government. Originally, only men who were born in Athens and who were considered wealthy enough were allowed to be citizens. These citizens had the right to vote, to be a part of a jury that made decisions in the court of law, and to serve in the assembly, a large group of men who debated and created the laws. Over time, even poor men and some merchants who were not born in Athens, but who lived and traded there, were allowed to take part in the assembly. However, because there were too many citizens, over 5,000, participating in the assembly, it became too difficult to manage the meetings and allow everyone to have their say. Eventually, the Athenians decided to have some citizens from each area come to the assembly to represent the people from their area, so that the group could be smaller and easier to manage. Every citizen still had the right to choose who would represent them in the smaller assembly. Women, however, did not have the rights to do any of these things, although they could own land and have their own money. Athenian girls also did not have the right to attend school as the boys did. For Athenian women, it was more important that they learn to cook, sew, and clean. However, all well-educated young ladies learned at least enough mathematics at home to be in charge of a household budget. And some who had learned reading and writing at home were widely admired for their intelligence and learning. Most Athenians knew that the best woman friend of Pericles, leader of the Athenians, wrote many of his famous speeches for him. Yet she was not permitted to listen to him speak those words in the assembly, nor to vote for the laws he suggested. Seeing Pericles up ahead now, Dion asked Hero, "Who are those two men with him?" Hero peered above the heads of others in the crowd. "Only one of the greatest writers in the world, and the artist who designed the statue of Athena," Hero answered. He smiled. "Only in Athens could you witness a conversation among the greatest living political leader, a world-famous writer, and such a celebrated artist. Don't you wonder what those great men are talking about?" "Whatever it is," Dion responded, "I'm sure it is the most fascinating conversation."